Hello, lovely friend. I am Dr. Mary Barson.
And I'm Dr. Lucy Burns.
We are doctors
and weight management and metabolic health experts.
and this is the Real Health and Weight Loss Podcast.
Good morning, lovely friend. How are you today? Dr. Lucy here, and I am without Dr. Mary, but you should see her replacement this morning. I don't think you'll get them mixed up. They are, first of all, different genders, so that's always a good giveaway, and many other similarities and some differences, and I am super excited because you're going to love him. His name is Dr. Gihan Jayawira, affectionately known as Dr. G, which I also love. And he is, like me, a lifestyle medicine doctor, but he is phenomenal at writing and has a brilliant new book out, which I think you're going to love. So I'm super excited to talk to him because what his mission in life is to get everyone to feel a bit happier. And who doesn't want that? Dr. G, welcome to the podcast.
I feel so welcome. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. So yay. You're in Melbourne too, like me. So, and our listeners are all over the world, which is exciting. But it's funny, I often bang on a bit about the weather. And the reason I bang on about the weather is for some reason, I don't know whether I was just given the sort of weather gene, but I find the weather really impacts my mood. So I'm constantly chasing a little bit of sunshine to make myself feel happier. But I think you are probably a bit of an expert in happiness. And I have been reading your book, which is phenomenal. The book is called Do Happy, which I'm also intrigued about that. So I thought we might kick off by starting a bit about happiness and why that's a driver for you.
Wow. So I reckon when someone writes a book about happiness, they were probably unhappy at some point.
Yeah.
and that was me. So this book was starting to be written when I didn't even realize. So I was back in high school. I reckon this is the origin of this book. And I was in the middle of getting quite badly bullied. Like big forehead, big ears, lunch for a seasoned bully, right? So,
Right.
And before you or any of the listeners start to feel like even an inch of like sorry or sympathy for me, I was also a bully.
Right.
So it's probably honestly my single regret in life, but here we are, kids are dumb, including me.
It is kind of a dog-eat-dog world in childhood.
But that was a very tricky period because I was bullied quite frequently and there was a lot of tears during that period. And I remember not liking it, but I also don't remember thinking it was a problem either. Like I didn't have the vocabulary to describe what was happening.
Yep.
And that continued for quite a long time. And then that sort of shifted into med school. Thankfully, I wasn't bullied in med school. But medical school was incredibly difficult. Like I thought like if I worked my butt off, I joked that I had no butt by the end of high school because I just worked it all off, got into medical school, and to my surprise, medical school was harder than high school.
Yeah.
And now you're surrounded by very high performing people and you sort of constantly, you just can't keep up. Well, I couldn't keep up. I was behind by the first week. And I found that period very stressful. Not that I was unhappy all the time, but that was a very difficult, 6 years spending time away from my girlfriend that I met at high school. Now I call her my wife.
High school sweethearts.
My parents, my closest high school friends, like there was a lot going on. I was only 17 when I went to Adelaide to study. I had like zero life skills. So it was all sort of happening at once. And it was a very, very difficult period. And in particular, it came up to a sort of head in fifth year, which was what we call our barrier year. They test us on all the 5 years of medical school. You fail one subject, you repeat the whole year. And in my mind, I was thinking, if I have to repeat another year, that's one more year away from my future wife. That's one more year away from my parents and like my security and all this sort of stuff, right? So it's really, really stressful. And it got a little weird. like in retrospect, like I was like I didn't realize this again. I didn't have the vocabulary. If you asked me at the time, Lucy, I would have just told you it's hard or I'm stressed. Like that's it. Like I wouldn't have actually, and I would have been completely honest. I wouldn't be trying to hide anything. I would have just told you I'm really stressed. But then looking back, like it's bizarre stuff. Like I was showing legitimate OCD traits. I think, I was, I couldn't control the result of my exams. So I just tried to control all these little minuscule things. Like I would check the stove 6 times, walk back to my room and check it again to make sure it was off. I would check the taps to make sure it's completely off multiple times, go back to my bed and think, I'm pretty sure I closed that tap, but I'm going to go check again. And when I finally did pass medical school, I just collapsed in a heap and it all sort of came to me and I realized how ridiculous I was behaving and how much I had sacrificed my health and my happiness. And at that point, like as soon as I got my results, I just collapsed in a heap and just decided I'm never going to let this happen again.
Ah, wow.
Then the journey became formalized. I started looking for answers, started reading. My favorite place became the airport bookshop because I was flying back and forth from Melbourne to Adelaide. So I would always go to the wellbeing and entrepreneurship section.
Yes.
And just try to read everything, Martin Seligman's work, like everything that I could find. And I essentially taught myself how to be happy. And for me, my belief is that it's a skill. And if it's a skill, it can be learned. And if it can be learned, it can be taught. So one of my friends asked me, like, who did you write it for? Like, he's another business guy. So I think he was asking, like, who's your niche? What's your niche?
Yeah. Who's your audience?
It was a very, very like technical question. But the answer I gave was I wrote it for the person I was,
Yes. Yes. I read that actually in your dedication at the start.
Yes, exactly. Well picked up. Because this is the book I would have loved to read if I was in the airport bookshop. It was like, dude, just give me the full blueprint, start to finish. This book would be it for me, right? So here we are. And now I'm on a podcast with Dr. Lucy. It's crazy.
And we're all so happy. I think there was some really great things that I loved about this book is that you've got a workbook that goes with it. Because I think what a lot of people do, and I have certainly done this many times, you read a book and you go, oh, that's great. Oh, that's amazing. And then you don't implement anything. And so the workbook then gives you that next step to implement some of the things that you're learning in the book.
Absolutely. I think that's the ultimate meta skill, or a ultimate meta skill, is to be able to learn and close the gap between implementation. Like if you can I even say it explicitly in my book, like I'd prefer someone to read a chapter and implement everything in that chapter, then read the whole thing and implement nothing, So I couldn't agree more. And it's hard because there's a joy in reading. Like there's a joy in sort of progressing through a book.
Yeah. And look, I think sometimes it depends too, where you are in that sort of change behavior cycle if you're in that sort of the planning stage or the pre-contemplative stage and you're reading something, it makes you feel better at the time because you feel like, oh, I'm doing something. But you kind of not really. It's a bit like moving, pushing all the pens around when you're getting your desk ready to study.
Or checking your email when you should be doing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, of course.
I think like the ability to close that gap is an absolute superpower. And one of my single greatest learnings is that and I'm convinced this is true, is that for every problem that we will ever face, someone has written a book about the solution. So if you get good at identifying the problems in your life, you just need to find the book.
Yes.
And then do the thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise it doesn't work. Hence why it's called Do Happy. It's very explicitly, big book on action, right? Doing the work. I tell anyone that wants to listen about me talking about books, I'll take that opportunity. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I loved that you just said then is the do bit, so that implementing, which again is part of your, like, the strategy in the book, the think, feel, do, which again is something that we spend a lot of time in our programs too, based on CBT, because I think particularly, I don't know, in Australia, probably UK as well, not so much America, because I love talking about their feelings, but Australians, UK, I don't know, whether people from India and China and Indonesia and Southeast Asia talk about feelings much. I suspect China not, and it's all just about doing for them. But what I think because we don't talk about feelings, we have this sort of we're not very emotionally literate. So you were saying you didn't have the words, and I think you're right. Lots of people just use stressed when they really mean guilty or lonely or resentful, or there's all of these other words, and we just use stressed. And stressed, people use stressed instead of even worried, because it's a sort of just a catch-all word, isn't it?
I agree. I mean, that the vocabulary is a problem defined as a problem half solved. Unfortunately, I was not wise enough to actually come up with that quote, and I can't fully attribute it, but it wasn't me. But the point still exists. Right. If you can define the problem, and if you are insert unhappy synonym, stressed, anxious, depressed, overwhelmed, stuck, burnt out, whatever that is, if you don't have a really good grasp of what that actually is, what the problem actually is, it becomes harder to solve it. Hence why I spent so much time defining things, because once you define it, it's much easier to sort of point and shoot,
Yeah, absolutely. Because I guess if you can define the feeling, then you can recognize the thoughts behind it and think about what's driving it.
Yep.
Yeah. So I love that. So the book also, focuses a fair bit on the lifestyle medicine pillars. So tell me about your journey to becoming a lifestyle medicine doctor.
So I didn't realize I was doing lifestyle medicine until I found ASLM, which is the Society of Lifestyle Medicine in Australasia. I always thought I was sort of like the odd one out. I didn't quite fit in when I became a GP or started my training, or even as early as hospital. Most of it didn't make sense. For example, in the hospital, I would get a page at 2 a.m. Let's say I'm on nights. Thankfully, I don't do nights anymore. How good is that? So 2 a.m, I'll get a page saying this patient's blood pressure is really high. Come and do something about it. Firstly, I think why are we checking his blood pressure at 2 a.m? Mine would be high as well. But two, it's we sort of go there and you might prescribe something and you bring it down and then it's so what? But you're not actually addressing root causes. And addressing root causes is hard because it takes a lot of time to get to the root cause. But once you do, it's this aha moment for everyone involved, and the care is so much better. So naturally, I realized pretty quickly that I definitely can't do the 10 to 15 minute consults for these types of patients who want to, essentially improve their lives, treat their diabetes or treat their blood pressure, or if they're unhappy. So I started doing longer consults. In one of my practices, I convinced the practice owner to put a whiteboard in my room so I could teach. And over the years, I started, teaching them about gratitude and, prescribing connection, all this sort of stuff, prescribing 0 screen time. And, for sleep, I might prescribe exercise in the morning and, no blue light at night, all this sort of stuff. And then on the flip side, I would see the opposite of that, temazepam being prescribed for insomnia when there's no discussion about sleep, like the actual like how to improve the quality of his sleep, or antidepressants being prescribed when actually it's like a situational thing, and all they need to do is like I had this kid who was, it's not really a kid, he was like 21, and his parents brought him in, and he was suicidal, like really, really struggling, and the parents were really worried. He was dependent on marijuana, and his friends actually caught him stealing money from another friend. It's like all like turning into a mess, and they came in a breaking point. And when he saw me, we looked at, in my book, I call it the Do Happy Snapshot, which is like sort of essentially the lifestyle medicine pillars. And we sort of do a quick snapshot of where everything's at. And that, as you would expect, everything was like 0 to 1, 0 exercise, 0 connection, 0 time in nature, 0 gratitude, 0 meditation, like everything. So we tried to find the thing that would move the needle the most. For him, it was exercise. And he loved basketball. So we got him playing exercise and basketball. And within sort of 3 to 4 weeks, like he wasn't quite fixed, of course, but he was much better, much better. On the flip side, it could have been quite easy for me to prescribe an antidepressant. And maybe that was part of it, but it wouldn't have got him all the way there. Like, you need to do everything, right? So then, I just sort of spent the first few years of my career thinking that I was the odd one out, like I was the weird one. Am I even doing the right thing? Should I be prescribing the thing? Am I going against my medical degree? All this sort of stuff. And then I found Aslam. And I was like, oh, cool. And I realized I wasn't the weird one. Everyone else was weird. So, which is always a nice realization. What every weird person would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, to find your people, I think it's part of a pillar, isn't it? It's connection and feeling like you belong somewhere rather than feeling like you're in the wrong tribe, so to speak. I think it's hard. I think if you asked any doctor, they would always say to you, oh, yes, lifestyle stuff, you should always do that first. It's just that they don't ever talk about it. And then they'll also, the subtext is, oh, and by the way, it doesn't work. So, do it, but it doesn't work. And I think there's kind of a couple of things going on there. One is that I don't think doctors do lifestyle medicine very well in general. And part of that is the systemic construct around general practice visits, where we are incentivized to see shorter consults, faster throughput. The government sort of thinks, well, the more people the doctor sees, the better it is, when really it's actually the opposite, because as you said, you're just band-aiding problems and more band-aids, and then eventually the dam bursts. I think I've mixed about 10 metaphors there.
The Band-Aid was holding the dam together.
Something like that, yes. The waterproof Band-Aid. So, but I like it like you, when you see people get better without medication, or even get to the point where you can reduce or eliminate medication, I go, oh, it's so exciting.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
And I imagine you're noticing something similar. I'd love to hear what you think, Lucy, about this. Is I'm noticing a obvious trend, let's say roughly for people under the age of 50, where they do not want to be on anything, any medications. You can almost see it in their body language, where if you tell them that their cholesterol's a bit high, they're sort of like leaning back. They're expecting me to tell them they're going to have to go on a lifelong cholesterol lowering medication. But when I suggest not, what about, how about we get to the gym, how about we do all the things, right? They sort of lean in again, and you're empowered. It's truly patient-centered. You're truly empowering them, and it's empowering for us as the practitioner as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I see kind of two things happening. One, I see, yes, some people who have been on lots of medications are keen to reduce them, which is great, because, it's cheaper for them. There's, less drug interactions, less side effects. And I think it's fabulous. I think one of the things I also see, though, and I get a bit angsty about this, is people are judging people for needing medications. And it is good to get off medications. Like there's nothing that is absolutely good, but it doesn't make you better than somebody else. And I think I see a lot of that, people, and again, it's not necessarily the Jobo public. It might be some, influencers, and they're kind of boasting about their health, which I feel conflicted because on one hand I'm going, yeah, absolutely. I want to prescribe as few medications as possible, but just because you need medication doesn't make you a failure either. And because again, I see people going, oh, I want to get off my medication. It's great. And then they do all the things and, they start their exercise, they're sleeping well, they may have changed their food, they've, lost 10 kilos, but they still need a blood pressure medication. Like their blood pressure hasn't got better, even though you would be thinking all of the things. And so then they feel like the whole thing was a waste of time. And I go, no, you haven't failed. Like it's not a failure to need medication. What we want to do is get to the point where it's not the first step in the process. That's the kind of way I like to look at it.
Yeah, that is a fascinating conflict, isn't it? If I was to reflect that on myself, I want to delay the use of medications in my own life, in my own health. Medications or like more invasive things. So I wonder whether part of our practice, as lifestyle medicine doctors, is we have to be very careful of how we advise or project, because it can be a mirror into ourselves, isn't it? So that's the really interesting reflection. I think it's up to the patient to decide. Some people, they want to try to do everything they can before they start medication. Some people are completely fine. They're like, if I have to. So I guess it's gauged by them as well, isn't it? But sometimes, like if you follow the evidence, sometimes you do need something.
Yeah. Obviously, we're wanting the least possible medications. And I always add into at the lowest effective dose. But I sometimes see people who have, say, Hashimoto's, which for our listeners is an autoimmune condition that affects the thyroid gland and causes hypothyroidism, so low thyroid. And we often need to replace their thyroid hormone with thyroid medication or thyroxine. And there are plenty of people who don't want to be on it. And, again, it becomes problematic. And I think that sometimes they're getting their information from people on the internet who again, are demonizing medications and saying, well, you shouldn't be on these drugs. You can fix it all by lifestyle. And as much as I'm a lifestyle advocate, you can't always fix everything by lifestyle. You can fix lots of things, but not everything.
I think that's true. I think you can do a lot towards preventable diseases, as you know, and reduce your risk of things like heart disease and diabetes and strokes and all these sort of things. And I would add unhappiness to a certain extent. And sometimes you just need something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's lots of factors at play there that you don't always have control over. Genetics for one. And, for most of my listeners know I have muscular dystrophy. It's a genetic condition. I just got born slightly unlucky with the genes. I do as much as I can to optimize my lifestyle around that, but it certainly hasn't cured it. And honestly, if there was a medication for it, I would take it. So in some ways there's a little bit of, and it's a sort of slightly weird concept, but there's some privilege in being, if there is a medication for the condition and it works for you and you've already done all the lifestyle stuff as well, then I would take it.
Yeah, when you just talked about your muscular dystrophy, it just got, again, one of these ancient philosophers, I can't quite remember who, but he's saying for a healthy person will have 1,000 wishes, but a sick person would only have one. And sometimes we take it for granted, isn't it? Especially if you don't have something that's obvious, something that's silent, something like diabetes,
Yeah. There was this great ad on telly years ago. It actually got pulled because it was a bit controversial. It was by Specsavers, I think. And it was going around and they were interviewing people on the street, asking them, how much would you sell your eyes for? People are going, what?
Jeez.
Yeah, really what? And they're going, well, can I buy your eyes? What? Well, how much will you sell them for? I'll give you $10,000. What? No. $1 million. No. They would get, and, this, how much will you sell them for? And of course, nobody took them up on their offer at all. And then it was like, your sight is actually invaluable and you don't appreciate it until it's gone. So I think with a lot of things with our health, our bias, so our cognitive bias, is to believe it will be with us forever. So, yeah, interesting.
By definition, I mean, it's one of the few things that we can say for certain won't.
Yes. Yeah. And, I mean, again, like everything, you don't want to go into extremes and be so focused on, people get health anxiety and get so focused on every little thing and get so worried about small things that really probably aren't that important in life in general. But bringing it back to your book, which I love, as I said, because it gives you a workbook to implement, and that implementation is the key to everything. But tell me about some of the strategy, or tell the listeners, because again, I want them to know some of your, what do you think what are your favorite strategies in your book? Because again, I don't know if it's like choosing your children, which one's your favorite, but.
What is my favorite strategy? Goodness gracious. Depends what problem I'm trying to solve. So it really does depend on the bottleneck in my life. So if I was fearful of something, then 100% the chapter on getting out of your own way, which I go deep into this thing that I call pressure testing, which is essentially exposure therapy on steroids, is where you intentionally put yourself in these situations that bring out whatever it is that you're fearing, with the caveat that you have created an environment, an artificial environment, which is completely safe. So the stakes are low, but it still brings out those same fears and anxieties. And you repeatedly immerse yourself in it. And you play with the three variables of how much, how often, and how intense. And you play with those variables to that point of discomfort, and then eventually you just become desensitized. This is how I started public speaking. Like I had my first sort of MC gig. We ran this charity event many years ago, did the MC gig. It was like 300 Sri Lankan uncles and aunties. I stood up there, had this awesome speech. No one listened. They didn't even know I was on the stage. They were just talking amongst themselves. I told myself I'll never speak again. And then I said, well, this is like years later. I actually didn't. Years later, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to speak as much as I possibly can. So I spoke everywhere. And eventually it just became really comfortable. And so if I was fearful of something, pressure testing would be my favorite. If I was getting a bit lost in life or feeling like something is not quite right, or if I'm sort of starting to wonder, like, what is the point of all of this? What is the purpose of any of this? Then the last 3 chapters in my book, which is all about perspectival action, like changing or at least reflecting on our perspectives, reflecting on things like death, reflecting on things like conditionality, reflecting on things like identity, who we are, if anybody. So if I was in a sort of deeper mode where I need some wisdom, I would sort of start in those final 3 chapters. And if I just know that I've sort of just a bit off, a bit more irritable, nothing's not quite right, I would look at those lifestyle medicine chapters essentially, because almost always something is giving. And it's usually exercise.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because for me, it's I think sleep moves the needle. It's so interesting when people are stressed or worried or, as you said, something's a bit off. So they're not, they don't have some major pathological condition, but they've just got a lot on their plate and they're just, as you said, a bit grumpy, a bit irritable, too many things to do. And so we sit at the end of the day on the couch thinking, oh, thank God, this is my time. I can unwind. And then you don't want to get off the couch because it's like the whole hamster wheel starts again as soon as you hop into bed, because the next thing you do is go to sleep and then wake up and blah, blah, blah. And so you delay and delay and delay. And during that time, you're scrolling on Instagram to get a little bit of dopamine, making you feel worse than ever because everyone else is apparently feeling fabulous and you're feeling like a piece of poo. And so you kind of, it's like you do the opposite of what you technically should be doing.
Sleep is also, there's this great quote by Andrew Huberman. Is like, if you want to find out how people are going, don't ask how they are, ask how their sleep's going.
Yeah, yes.
And one of the most fascinating discoveries I gained from researching the sleep chapter in my book is the sleep cycles, and in particular how the non-REM and the REM stages work. And it's fascinating that, let's say in an 8-hour sleep session, like the cycles are not created equally. They're all different. So at the start, you have much deeper sleep, much more non-REM or rapid eye movement sleep, which is really important for things like recovery and memory retention, all that sort of stuff. And then towards the end, you get most of your REM sleep or your rapid eye movement sleep, which is, in the context of this discussion, it's one of the most important parts of sleep for emotional regulation. Once you see that graph, like you can't unsee it, because let's say if you normally sleep 8 hours, but then one night you sleep 6 hours, how much sleep have you lost? 2 hours. And you've lost about 50% of your REM sleep. So that is why everyone is so annoying if you don't sleep enough. Like, it's got nothing to do with them. They're the same level of annoyance, but it's you're missing out on, potentially you're missing out on a key part of your sleep. So I think you're right. People inadvertently sort of mess up the quality of their sleep towards the end of the night by doing things that really wire them up as opposed to wind down. And then given the society we're in, which I am unfortunately also a part of, where we actually want to do all this stuff and we're busy and we've got all this stuff going on and we try to squeeze as much into the day as possible. And then sleep is one of the first things to go. And I'm such a big advocate for sleeping more now.
Totally. I remember somebody once said to me, I wish I had more hours in the day. And I go, oh no, I wish I had more hours in the night.
I like that. Wow, I love that.
Yeah, well, I think we steal from the night to supplement our day when really it's a false economy. My other favorite saying is that humans are the only animals to voluntarily restrict our sleep. No other animal does it. Cows aren't out there going, oh, I should be going to sleep, Daisy, but, too busy chatting.
Got to check my feed.
Yeah, yes. And that's where we'll hit pause on part 1 of this joyful deep dive with Dr. G. In part 2 next week, we dig into the juicy stuff, how your beliefs shape your reality, why doing happy beats just feeling happy, and how to rewire your thoughts for a better life, plus practical tips you can start immediately. Speak to you then, lovelies. The information shared on the Real Health and Weight Loss podcast, including show notes and links, provides general information only. It is not a substitute, nor is it intended to provide individualized medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor can it be construed as such. Please consult your doctor for any medical concerns.